Hey there everyone, and on the day I release this video, it is National Suicide Prevention Day, and as a result, I want to share with you a story about the hardest year of my life. In August 2009, I made an attempt on my own life, and I want to get into two things. I want to get into number one, what led up to that, and number two, what has happened since then. Because I want this to be something that if you're struggling out there, you can resonate with, but you can also draw hope from. The thing with the vast majority of people who are suicidal is it's often not just a single thing in life that's come along and sideswiped the person. It's often many different things coming from a lot of different angles. It's one of the actual few things I really appreciated about the show 13 Reasons Why was it showed that some of these things that might seem seemingly insignificant, when they add up, when a person is living with all of that at the same time, and all these things are coming from different angles, that person gets chipped away at. And an otherwise happy person, an otherwise kind of optimistic person that might feel and act like they've got everything going for them, when little things and big things and medium things all come together at the same time and chip away at a person, it can put them in a mindset that absolutely distorts everything. About a week ago, I released a video called The 3 Lies of Suicide, the 3 lies our mind will tell you during that period. And all of these things can contribute towards you not only hearing those lies, but believing those lies. If you haven't checked that video out, I will link to it in this one as well. So for me, there's what happened a long time before, there's medium term, and then there's what happened immediately before. And it would be unfair to blame any single one of these things as the reason that light went off in my head. I grew up in a broken home, which is tremendously and unfortunately very common now, but wasn't as common in the 80s. I went to school with a bunch of people that all had both parents at home. I saw my dad for a couple of hours a week, and really it was quite obvious that he preferred my brother. So my self-esteem growing up was absolutely non-existent. You know, I was picked on by my dad, I was picked on by my brother, I was picked on by pretty much every man in my life, made me very untrusting of men. But I also kind of valued myself extremely low. So the first relationship I got into, I rushed far too far ahead with that. You know, got married, had a couple of kids, don't regret that one bit. But looking back, I know that I got into that situation out of the low self-esteem, and ultimately I ended up ruining that marriage. And that was one of the first things that kind of fell down. That was one of the first things where, you know, I really felt like, I felt guilty for what I'd done. I felt like I'd made mistakes in my life, and I felt like no one else would ever love me again. I genuinely got into that relationship thinking no one else is ever going to love me. And then I was thinking no one else is ever going to love me again when coming out of that relationship. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14. So my moods go all the way up here, they come all the way down here. I am much more prone to depression than your average person. And when I sit in a depression, I can sit in it for months at a time. It can be quite a horrible and terrible experience. But coming out of my first marriage the first time, because we broke up, got back together, broke up again, I turned to some other things as a way to find my escapism, to find my belonging or my fitting in. So I started taking drugs with a bunch of new friends. I started drinking more heavily. I wanted to be out partying, and I just became the complete and opposite type of person to who I know I am in my heart. And whenever you do that, the worst person you can be in conflict with is yourself, because if you're not living up to your own expectations and your own standards and how you feel you should be living, then you're going to be walking around every single day kind of treating yourself like someone who's a pain in the backside, treating yourself like someone that you'd see on the street and be like, why are they acting like that? When that person is you, when that person is in the same skin that you're in, it becomes so much more difficult to deal with. And then on the back of all of that, I got into a relationship which was just chaotic, really. And in order to be in this relationship, I cut off pretty much ties with everyone. I cut off ties with my friends. I cut off ties with my family. And there's a picture, I'll pop the picture up on the screen now. There was a picture a year before the suicide attempt in V Festival 2008. And in this picture, as you'll be able to see, there's me with a bunch of friends pulling a stupid pose. The person next to me in that is my first wife. We were still together at this point. And within the course of the next 12 months, I basically just self-sabotaged my entire life. I ruined friendships in order to be in this new relationship. I, again, pushed my family to one side. I wasn't speaking to anybody. And this picture came up on my time hop in 2009, and it was like a year ago today. And it's like, nice, thanks Facebook for reminding me of this good memory. That could have been a really nice thing, but I was already in a place where I'd lost all my friends, and now I wasn't even speaking to the person that I'd left that relationship to be with. And I just felt like, what have I done? I tried to reach for 1% more, and I've ended up with, I had 99% of everything in life. I tried to reach for 1% more, and selfishly, and ended up with absolutely nothing. And I looked at this, and all I could see in this picture was everything I'd lost. I wasn't a good dad at this point. I was not, I was turning up, I was turning up in body, but I was not turning up in mind. My kids, who were 2 and 4 at the time, were tucking me in on the couch and putting a blanket over me whilst I let them watch telly, and I just sat there sobbing. I genuinely thought I was the worst person on the face of the planet. I felt like I had nothing left to give. I felt like there was no point to me being around. I felt like my kids deserved better, but I didn't feel capable of giving them better. I couldn't cook for them. I couldn't clean for them. Not because I didn't have the abilities. A year before, I was cooking and cleaning fine. But at this point, when you reach that kind of level with your mental health, your abilities switch off. Your ability to actually do anything, you feel overwhelmed by the smallest of things. The idea of making beans on toast, or the idea of making sure that there's clean underpants, or whatever it might be. The relative difficulty of these things when you are feeling like that is off the charts. It is unfathomable. And that was where I was at. And the whole time, torturing myself. Again, imagine living with your biggest troll. My biggest troll was inside my own head, telling myself that I'm worthless. I have nothing to give this world. I'm a terrible person, and the world would just be better off without me. And then that was one of the lies. And the other one was about the fact that it was always going to be like this. That brain of mine was saying to me, you're never going to be any better than this. You're never going to amount to any more than this. This is you. This is it. You may as well just get out of the way and make room for someone else to come along and look after your kids. Make room for someone else to come and hang out with your friends. You're worthless, and you're going to be like this forever. And in 2 final acts of desperation, we often say to people, just do something you enjoy. So I went off to Liverpool, bought myself a new Liverpool kit, was doing a bit of retail therapy. I think I might have got myself a new computer game or something as well, but I went out and spent a bit of money on myself, which I don't normally do. And then I was just feeling a little bit better, but feeling like I needed a bit of a boost. And so I sent a message, I put a message on Facebook, and this is Facebook 2009, which wasn't in everyone's pockets to the same level as it is now. I put this message on Facebook saying, I need a hug. And I thought to myself, by the time I get home, there'll be a bunch of hugs coming in. I'll see, I was hopeful, I was genuinely very hopeful. I'll see that there are people out there that still care about me. And I drove home 45 minutes and I got back and there was absolutely 0 hugs on there. And I know, watching this, if you don't know me, you might think of this as being quite needy. You might think of this as being quite attention-seeking. One of the biggest things I've learned through all of this is that it's not attention-seeking. It's connection-seeking. When a person is suicidal, they don't want attention. They don't want just people to go, oh, look, they're suicidal. Let's pay attention to them. what that person wants is connection. And what they want is they want it from 1 or 2 or 3 people. At that time, I probably wanted it from my mum, from my best friend, or, still at that point for the girl that I felt I'd thrown everything away to be with. That was probably the 3 people that I wanted attention from. I didn't want attention from them. I wanted connection. I wanted what attention brings connection, Well, it brings the possibility of connection at least. And in the absence of all this, when all those lies are going around in my head, that was all the evidence. That was all the evidence I needed to say, well, you were right. Nobody does care about you. Absolutely no one cares about you. And that's the third lie. The third lie is the one about the world. About yourself, about the future, about the world. When those 3 are together, it's something called Beck's triad, and it is extremely common in people who try to take their own lives, because the combination of those 3 things just makes you feel so utterly desperate and isolated. And off the back of that, I decided to try and take my own life. And instead of leaving a note, I won't go into methods because it's irresponsible to go into methods, but instead of leaving a note, once the method I'd chosen had started, I phoned my mum to say goodbye. I hadn't spoken to my mum in a long time at this point. And she turned up at my house with the police and with an ambulance and basically got me off to hospital. And while we were there, I still just felt the added sort of pressure of like, what have I done? Mum was quite angry. She was compassionate, but she was also angry, which I understand now, but at the time it wasn't what I needed to hear in the slightest. So I ran away from the hospital, and I ended up walking past one friend who literally just said, he's just doing it for attention, leave him alone. And I walked to the house of another friend. And at that house, this is a friend I'd not been speaking to for 6 months at this point, because of, he basically said to me, this person's bad for you, you need to leave her. And he kept on telling me that. And in the end, he said, look, I can't sit back and watch this happen. You're destroying your life. And his way of caring for me in that was to say, it was to basically point out some harsh truths. And I went to his house and I burst out crying, and I was just like, look, I know we're not speaking, but I really need you. I'm really feeling, I can't take it. I really need you. And he took me back to the hospital, made sure I got cared for, and made sure I got checked, made sure I was there while I got discharged. And the next day, and I now remember this because I've checked the timeline, but it took me out to the cinema to see Inglourious Bastards. We went and watched that and just treated me like I was a normal human being for a day, which is exactly what I needed at the time. Often when someone is depressed or when someone is suicidal, we treat them as a depressed or suicidal person. We treat them as a statistic or a symptom. We don't treat them as a person anymore. He treated me like a person. And that's one of the big learnings there, is that I wasn't looking for attention, I was looking for connection. I felt disconnected from absolutely everybody in my life, and I needed to make a connection. And it would have been terrifying for me to turn up at his door before the suicide attempt. It would have been terrifying for me to turn up at his door and say, I really need you. I've messed up. Things are really bad and I need my best friend back. And if I'd have said that, I'd have probably got my best friend back before the suicide attempt. And that would have got me exactly what I was looking for with that Facebook post. But instead of being a sort of big, wide, scattershot approach to try and reach as many people as humanly possible, only to then have no one come back, this more direct way would have been a much harder to do, because it's easier to just go tap on the phone and send, but it would have been a much harder to do, but a much more safe and a much better outcome for me. It's one of the huge things that I've learned. I'm going to come right back with part 2. Now, I'd love to say that directly after this experience, I had that sort of light bulb moment, woke up and realized that I had to make a change. But to be perfectly honest, for a couple of weeks I didn't. I sat and watched movies that I'd rented from Netflix, which at the time, Netflix sent movies in the post, so you have to wait for the next one. And it was actually one of these movies, this me trying to escape and just kind of pass the time, that made the really big difference in my life. I watched a film called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and it's a French film adapted from a novel and of a true story where a guy has ALS, locked-in syndrome. And he learned to communicate with the nurse by blinking to actually then help her to write the book. And it's through his story. He's got 2 kids himself, and there's a part in the film, spoilers unfortunately, but there's a part in the film where he goes to the beach with his kids, and he's in the wheelchair. He's completely and utterly strapped up to all the machines and everything. He can't do anything. He can only watch. And I remember watching that and just thinking like how tragic that was at the time, and knowing this was a true story and everything as well. But it was what he said next that had the most power. While he's watching his kids, he says, "I realised that even a shadow, even a fragment of a dad is still a dad." And that hit me so hard because, I'd been this fragment of a dad, and I'd looked at it thinking, well, this fragment of a dad's just worthless and got absolutely nothing to offer to the world. And seeing this person who is in a much worse situation than me still realise that he can still be their dad even by just being there, just by virtue of being himself. Even if he can't interact with them, he's still their dad. And that, nothing in my life has ever hit me as hard as that. And off the back of that, I vowed to become the dad that my kids deserved. The belief was still there that my kids deserved a better dad, but I vowed to become that dad. And that's what I did. That's what I've done for the last 11 years. I have dedicated myself towards personal development, both physically and mentally. I've dedicated myself towards helping other people. And this was a really hard journey. And for anyone who's really struggled with depression, you'll know that it's not just a case of the light bulb goes off, you have all the motivation and everything's great and you go for it. When you're already exhausted, when you're already depressed, even making the slightest change is hard. But it is so much better than living in that place. And I dedicated the rest of my life to just trying to be that man, to be the man that my kids deserved, which started off to be the man that they deserved. And then eventually it became to be the man that I deserved. Because one of the big things I said earlier is that I had this low self-esteem. Low self-esteem comes from trying to live up to other people's expectations of what you think it takes or what you think they think it means to be good enough in life. And that's what I'd spent my entire life doing at this point. I'd spent my entire life judging whether I was a good dad on whether other people thought I was a good dad, whether I was a good person on whether other people thought I was a good person. And the thing is, you can spend your entire life as a good person and you can then spend 6 months basically acting different. You can even spend a little bit of time acting different to that person. And unfortunately, people will judge you on the worst of your actions, not on everything else that's come before. So the decision had to be made for me to be enough for myself, for me to decide what it is to be a good dad, for me to decide what it is to be good for me to decide what, when going to bed at night, I could put my head on my pillow and say, yeah, I'm happy with how I did things today. And the big thing, there's 2 more things I want to share with you. One of them is a few things that I have achieved in the last 11 years. I'm not doing this to show off. I'm doing this to say, if you think back to earlier in the video when I said I thought I had nothing left to offer. And a few weeks back, I decided to think, right, well, what are 11 things that I've done or changed or achieved within those 11 years? And the second thing is a letter that I wrote to myself should I ever find myself being suicidal again. I just want to share both of those things with you for 2 reasons. One is my biggest hope is that you will see this video and you will know that there is hope. There is hope beyond feeling suicidal. My favourite expression for this is some of the best chapters in your life are the ones that you haven't written yet. And this has been extremely true for me, and I've worked now with tens of people who have been at the point of being suicidal that have gone on to achieve amazing things when they too felt like they had nothing left to give. And the second reason is to show that even though at this one stage in my life when I was suicidal, that I saw the world through one lens, at the stage when I was beyond that, the exact same person is able to see the world in an exactly different way. So some things that the guy who had nothing left to give has given to himself and to the world since August 2009. In February 2009, I went to Thailand and I competed in Thai boxing in the ring in Phuket, something that a guy who was bullied in school and had zero self-confidence would never have been able to do. And there's a link to a video where I talk a bit more about that right here. In July 2010, when this same person who thought that no one else would ever love him, I got into a relationship with a person that I have now been in that relationship for 10 years and married to for 7. In the summer of 2010, I started going to the gym and actually made it stick for the first time in my life. So committing myself to making exercise a part of my daily routine. In June 2011, I returned to counselling. I went to a CBT, cognitive behavioural therapist specialist, and basically learned how to interrupt the thought patterns that led me to a lot of these more dark thoughts and led me towards beginning to find that self-esteem. In August 2013, I got married at a wedding with a bunch of friends of both my wife and me. I had rebuilt friendships from when, again, I thought that I had nothing. The following month in September, I retrained as a personal trainer to take what I'd learned from my own weight loss journey and body transformation journey and actually start making helping other people an integral part of my life. In January 2016, I launched a free mental health initiative called Matter Over Mind, where I would do a 2-hour class, 1 hour of physical training, 1 hour of mental health chat every single week for 2 years, where I would have it as free for anyone who was struggling, particularly those who were off work due to mental illness. In September 2018, despite my last time being in school being not particularly good, I went back into schools and started teaching kids about mental health awareness and ways in which they can positively impact stress, anxiety, and depression through an organisation called Change Talks, who you may have seen me talk with on the Mental Health Family Hour. This is a show that you can find all 14 episodes of on this YouTube channel. In both April of 2018 and March of 2020, I got to see both of my kids become teenagers, essentially young men. I got to talk to them both about this and to help them to realise that they were never the problem, I was. Last month, I ran 42 miles through the night to raise money for Sean's Place, a charity in Liverpool that was set up after Debbie, the owner and founder, lost her brother Sean to suicide last year. They're doing amazing things for the men in Liverpool, helping them to not feel isolated and helping them to learn new skills so that they feel empowered, providing a social enterprise that enables people to have more care outside of just what they can get from the medical professionals. And thanks to that run and a marathon earlier in the year, I've been able to raise over £1,000 to help them to provide that service. And finally, and probably the one that I'm most proud of, in January 2018, I launched a project called A Life a Day. Basically, the intention was to help one person a day for 2018, but it has ran for 2.5, nearly 3 years now. And on the 27th of September, I will have helped my 1,000th person by giving an hour of my time for free to an average of one person a day. And we've talked about suicide. There's been about 15 people that have been suicidal through those calls, and I've helped each one of those people and used my own personal experience as a way to empathise and connect with those people. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that we've done with that project, and long may it continue. And the thing is, there's so many more things, but I'm just pointing to 11, one for each of the years that I wouldn't have been here if I had been successful on that day in August 2009. And finally, I just want to read this letter that I've written to myself. I don't know it off by heart, so I am going to have to read it from my phone. So I hope you'll excuse that. But this is a letter that hindsight allowed me to write to myself, knowing what I know about myself and knowing what the way I was looking at the world was when I was suicidal. Dave, I know you and I know what you are going through. Maybe not down to the exact detail, but I understand the pattern that has led you here because I am you. I am the you that has survived this 3 times before, that has sat with you at the edge of the abyss, looking out to a future so consumed with darkness that it is all too easy to believe that it has no end. The eternity of the transient moment that you are feeling, stretched into infinity and compounded with a sense that somehow you are less equipped to handle this than before. You are more tired, more worn down, less resilient. I am the you that knows that some of the best chapters of your story came after the day you would have placed a full stop. But you didn't. You placed a semicolon, and despite the all-consuming grief you were feeling, the unceasing chaos within your mind, you found the strength to go on. I want you to know I am proud of you. Every extra day in your life, you brought more life to those around you. You used your expression of continuity to show others the opportunity for a life not only saved, but savoured. I'm sorry you were back here, but I guess as I wrote this, I knew it was always a possibility. But remember that mantra. This too shall pass. Don't let your condition make your decision. Insert one more semicolon and remain, if not open to the possibility of another chapter, at least curious of what it could hold. You got this, because I know you beyond anyone else, and I know that you are enough. So now, there's nothing left to do but put this video out to you guys and hope that some of it resonates. Some of it gives you a bit of strength. Some of it encourages you that if you are struggling, to place a semicolon, not a full stop, to keep going and be open to the possibility of something new, something better. Thanks for taking the time to watch.